Welcome to the Empowering Choices Parenting Podcast. My name is Joshua.
I'm Eric.
I am Lucas.
Eric and Lucas are licensed professional counselors. We have created an online community with a website and an app full of parenting resources and courses. Most importantly, all of this is centered around a private community where you can share your struggles with us and others. If you are interested in joining, please check out our website at empoweringchoices.community or search for our app in the App Store by searching Empowering Choices. For a small monthly fee, you receive everything I talked about and you help support the show. Plus, every time someone purchases a membership, we gift a membership on your behalf to someone who otherwise could not afford it. All right, now on with today's show.
Today, we are talking about developing your child's imagination.
So we definitely know that we have vivid imaginations, Eric, but why
Speak for yourself.
Oh, no, we've talked. I know you do also.
I sense about the time of birth, honestly.
So
Yes.
as a child, did you not need to develop your imagination if you were born with one?
Right.
See what I did there?
I'm kind of alluding to that. Yes, I just came out with an imagination, but that's not the way it happened. But it was definitely a deep and vivid imagination as it was developed.
Yes.
And one of the things that we've looked at is that research years ago showed that an imagination is something that is developed, and it's developed in specific ways, and has a huge stepping stone to other components such as empathy.
Well, I mean, and we've talked in other segments about how children are concrete, not abstract thinkers. And what is imagination, right? It's everything that is abstract.
But it starts off more concrete in a lot of different ways.
Unsurprisingly,
right?
As a brain develops from kind of concrete to abstract.
And it needs stimulation as a part of that. And what that research, showed is that a human imagination is developed through stories. And more specifically, it was developed through bedtime stories, which is, you go back a couple thousand years, storytelling was more of the verbal, more of the oral, and not as much of the written. But it did come into more written types of things. But really, in the modern age, bedtime stories are a huge bedrock for beginning to develop your child's imagination.
And I think that you would very firmly say that you probably shouldn't let your child watch a YouTube video as opposed to a bedtime story.
Well, and that's a great thing to bring up, because TV, video, YouTube, internet, they entertain us. They don't stimulate us in the growth of that imagination. So we sit there and we watch something where you have to train your mind to be able to watch that in an interactive way to where you're learning from it versus being entertained. Whereas being read a story, and especially at a young age, where you can, kind of interact with your child and you can talk about what is in the story. Bedtime storybooks have wonderful illustrations. So they are, when it's talking about the three little pigs, they're seeing three little pigs. That image is then going into their mind and helping to develop that imagination.
And probably assisting the very concrete, young child mind of well, I can't picture three little pigs. Okay, well, here's a picture.
Right.
And now you can put that in your head.
Right.
And then if your imagination can make that picture move or whatever.
I think I have a pretty good example as to how the brain kind of works with this, because as the child is growing, because we were, kidding around in the beginning that, I came out with a very vivid imagination. That would be assuming that I came out with, a brain that had fully lodged library of everything in the world as it was, as it worked, as it will work.
Sure.
Which is impossible. I had a child and his father, in session with me, and there was a situation, in the school where the child had gotten in a lot of trouble, and Dad was telling me, about what had happened. And what had happened is that the school was very, very concerned because he had threatened a teacher with a pair of scissors.
Which sounds terrible on its face.
Yes. Now, what our minds do is they fill in the gaps in our imagination as we picture different scenes.
Right. Threatened and scissors.
Right. And so my mind, because I didn't know what actually was in the classroom, placed in those 1 foot long metal, scissors that tailors used to use for hundreds of years. They're, sharp and pointy, and Mickey Mouse used, when he was, going after the beanstalk and everything.
And you could skin a deer with them.
And halfway through the session, I stopped and I went, wait, tell me about the scissors.
Right.
And the little boy looked at me and he goes, well, they're those little plastic things,
dull things,
safety cutting things, rounded tops. And both his dad and I looked at each other and went, oh, that's not what I had in mind.
So he also had the war sword, hand and a half, claymore in his head too.
We were finishing each other's sentences as we were describing what each of our brains had put in as scissors.
Right.
And so bedtime stories help the development of the subconscious library of what is in the world and how to classify it.
Yeah, and it's really crazy. The other night, me and my wife were, she asked me something about children's books, and it just got my mind thinking. And we recently had a bunch of snow happen, and I was remembering this book that my mom used to read to me, Katie the Snowplow. And it was like all of a sudden these like feelings and emotions and visual images. And so I looked up the book, and I was like, this is crazy. Like, I haven't read this book in, probably 35 years. How in the world do I remember any of this? But like just that whole connection, and then I started looking at other books like Are You My Mother? And there's a monster at the end of this book, and just it's amazing how as I was being read those, I would build up things in my mind about what that looked like and felt like. And
some of the best visuals that I've been able to find for how memories are kind of stored in our brains are the movie Inside Out. Where they have those memory orbs, which also in several of the Harry Potter movies, you have libraries of shelves of memory orbs. And that's what was being accessed. Is it was, when that came, the title of that came up with Snowplow, and your subconscious went and sent that up the pipe to the conscious, and then it unfolded all of those different things there that you got to then re-experience again, because 24/7 our subconsciouses are completely taking in all information around us and storing it.
Well, they're storing some of it. They're taking in a lot and dumping a lot, but there's so much stimuli, I can't take in all of it.
Well, and that's the thing. That's where the debate would start.
Sure.
And I would be more on the side of, oh no, it takes it in. You may not remember it, but there are certain practices out there like dream interpretation or hypnosis that have actually been used to bring more information out with where the person was saying, oh wow, I completely forgot about that. And so it's an interesting debate at that point. But I think the easy part is to say it stores things.
Right. I was going to say, we know very solidly that it does store some number of things. And
reading is the beginning of that storage to where the mind can help develop, that subconscious, And so reading, storytelling, bedtime stories, these types of pieces, and the funner that you can make it, the more you're helping the process. When I worked in a classroom, I had 2 volumes of the bedtime stories there, as well as when I worked in residential care. And I would bring those books out and put voices to the characters, and I have kids who are in my classroom that have found me, on Facebook, and they're in their late 20s, early 30s. And one of the first things that some of them said to me was, I still remember the voices.
That weren't in the book.
Stuck with them.
Yes, and they're like, that made it so cool, and one of the biggest parts of an imagination is research has shown you have to have an imagination to develop empathy.
And how much do we want our children to have that?
Now, that's what you have to ask yourself. Now, while you're thinking about that, remember, they're probably going to be the ones who decide where you go at the end of your life as a part of,
They
with
may
their
help pick
care
your
or
nursing home.
Yeah. And so do you want them to have a lot of empathy for you or just be done?
Yeah.
Just saying, it's on the board.
That's a little bit of the rubber meets the road as to why this is important.
Right.
There's lots of other reasons why it's important too, but I mean,
Well, let's just make it personal to your world and life. That's one
right.
part that's going to touch you.
Yeah.
And we laugh, but I've experienced.
but
this.
it's true. Yeah.
It really is true.
Well, and even just generically the building empathy skill, but then how do you build your child's imagination? Well, you by building the relationship that you have with them,
Right.
Which is only additionally positive for everything.
Exactly. If my kids in a classroom remember those stories, what are your kids going to remember, when they're adults, even more so?
Sure.
I only got to read to them once a month, maybe, and so how much of a greater impact is it with you nightly with your children? And it starts there. We talk about this a little more in the parenting manual, but my parents started with the bedtime stories, and when they could see that I was kind of moving beyond them, they gave me a choice into what would you like us to read at bedtime. And that opened up a whole new world. I went with the Hobbit series, Island of the Blue Dolphins, all kinds of adventurous type books, which also then kind of spliced into my own individual reading, because now I really like this. This was really great. My mom and I, we'd read in the evening, and I'm like, let's do it more during the day, and so she would kind of, read with me during the day. And then my dad wisely said, yeah, that's not going to work. And I'm like, well, it's working good. What do you mean it's not going to work? This is great. And my mom's like, what do you mean? And he said, if you read with him during the day, then you're going to take away the power of that being at bedtime.
Don't do both.
Don't do both. And I'm like, wait a minute. I think I'm getting the short end of some stick. And he's like, no, you need to pick out your own books during the day and make your own time. And once I kind of got over being a little pissed because, he took this away, it was a good thing. I enjoyed the ride. I went, wait, I can do what?
Wait. Yeah, you just gave me the keys
Yeah.
to do this by myself whenever I want to?
And I can
Wait a
read
second.
anything I want.
No.
So then I went into the world of the Hardy Boys, Henry Huggins, Encyclopedia Brown. Yes, we're doing more adventurous detective, boxcar children. And from there, that helped my imagination even more so. And one of my chores was to go out and bring wood in at night. We had a big kind of carport that had a lot of wood and things. You can really make a great boxcar out there. and my parents understood that. So my time limit was you have to be in by, when it's time to do bedtime routine of bath time, that kind of thing. But I would make boxcars out there and act out the different things, that I'd seen in the books, of any of those books. And, it was a great time. During the winter, we did live in LeGrand. They did limit it, 20, 25 minutes, when we were getting to, below zero.
To limit your exposure to hypothermia?
There was that, which I didn't really like. But, looking back, I can understand it.
Your parents are the reason you still have all of your toes?
Probably alive.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, priorities.
Right. My main priority was play.
Right.
And every day I hit that goal. And, that leads to the next thing. Toys and play help to further develop the imagination. So my parents made sure that I had, toys, and when I say toys that I would like to interact with, toys that I would enjoy. You know,
They didn't buy you Barbie dolls?
they didn't buy me Barbie dolls, no, but they did buy me Johnny Hex doll figures.
And I still have a question. Is that the right first name? I know we had a debate. I think it's Jonah. I think it's Jonah
There we go.
Hex.
Yes, we did. I'm stuck on that name, Johnny, in there. But Jonah Hex, yes. And I loved those. Those were great. I had many a battle with those. Army Men, Star Wars figures. You know, my parents would allow me, because we had a living room and it's where the TV was, but, you know, they only used it, you know, a little bit during the day, usually in the evening. And so I could make huge forts and things in there. And, you know, the longest I got to keep it up was like for a week, you know, but it was, you know, great. So, I mean, that's another way of continuing the development of the imagination, as is writing, you know, being able to move forward as your abstract thinking is growing, you know, and then if that's something that your child enjoys, you know, I wrote all kinds of stories, you know, I wrote all kinds of things, you know, from the time I was a child.
I would probably argue that. So I don't remember doing a lot of writing as a child. I remember doing a lot of drawing, right? And so you would draw
There's
the
another
thing.
piece.
Yeah, you would draw the thing you had in your imagination.
Yep.
And inevitably, it was nowhere near what you actually had in your imagination, but it was still kind of flexing that
Exactly.
mental experience.
Any of the building toys can be the same thing.
Legos, Lincoln Logs, blocks.
Tinker Toys, blocks.
Duct tape.
Why? Well, that one, you know, it'd been on my brother, but, you know, probably not that one.
Well, and actually, I'm going to take that you said with your brother. I'm going to take that as a segue to a thought I've been having in my head of like, you've been talking about building it with your parents, right? Good. Building it on your own. Good. Building it with other children, right? And that's additionally kind of the building of the empathy piece, because are children's imaginations going to bump heads and like there's going to be like disagreements about this stuff?
Yes.
Oh, dear goodness.
Yes. My brother and I would be a bad example. We were 5 years apart. We didn't really get along all that well growing up without adults involved. But the other kids in the neighborhood, we played a lot, and we played a lot along the same lines. They were reading books. I was reading books. You know, we were creating different imaginary worlds and things. And there were disagreements. We had to learn how to solve those. We had to learn how to work with them.
My imaginary guy shot your imaginary guy. No, they didn't. That bullet bounced off.
Right? Exactly. You know, and you had to work out those different things.
And I suppose we're all coming to this perspective from three dudes. So we're talking about bullets and guns and Jonah Hex. And I'm imagining that the female experience is not exactly the same.
Not exactly the same, but at the same time probably has the same types of underlying themes.
Well, correct. Yeah, the important part's all still there.
Right. Because they still have to be able to get along and play together. And some of the kid siblings that I have and see, you know, they're much more into, you know, the Barbie dolls or the American Girl dolls, and their sisters don't always agree on how they should play.
Oh, right. Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
yeah, that's a fundamental theme that remains the same.
Yep, exactly. And then the themes just kind of spread out from there as long as you have the basics. And empathy and imagination, you know, as you help your kids develop that, it doesn't go away.
Right.
You know, I've written several short stories that are, you know, ready for publication. You know, I have a book, a realistic novel that is, you know, 180 pages that I had to stop, you know, when I did my master's degree. I have several other books written in my head and a couple of short stories, you know, so the imagination, you know, played a big role in my life and has continued to, you know, well into adulthood.
Well, and let's connect this to the skill of like, as an adult, like self-care and hobbies and emotional management. And like, that can be a take it anywhere kind of skill to be able to be a well-rounded, you know, thorough human being that can do a lot of those things.
Right.
So
it helps to counteract the negative emotions.
Absolutely.
It helps to spigot those out, and we're about to get into a different podcast, you know, and to allow those avenues and those spillways to be there.
Well, and I'm going to stay within this podcast, but also I have conversations with my clients a lot about how can you use your imagination against the things that are going on inside your head. Right? I don't remember if I've mentioned this example before, but I have a client who had thoughts that I think he said they were sad thoughts. I'm like, okay, so what can we do about the thoughts in your head? And through the discussion that I think took all session, we finally came up with, well, I could imagine my dog, who I love very much, coming into my head, right, in an imaginative way, right, and eating the bad thoughts. And it literally worked for him, right? It helped him manage the bad thoughts, but he only got there through imagination.
Right.
It's cool.
And isn't, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not trained EMDR like you are, but isn't imagination a key component with some of the development of, tools as a part of the EMDR for the person?
Yeah, it's the same skill set that I've been talking about. Is you have to be able to manipulate the thoughts in your head using your imagination. And so there was one client who we talked about. EMDR includes a positive resource building exercise, which is a bunch of fancy words for like, think of things that you think will help you. Right? And there was a client who decided that they needed their, what was it? I think it was their powerful magic rainbow sword, right? And they developed that as a resource, and it was going to be powerful and it was going to help them. And then as they were thinking about their traumatic memories, they brought that item with them into the traumatic memories, and they were able to slay their monsters, right? Kind of literally and figuratively. So yeah, that's a trauma treatment, skill that is again, fueled by imagination.
Right. And I know we've kind of gotten into, kind of some therapy ways that imagination is used. And
we're a little biased that way.
Right. And kind of. And adulthood as to how, that works out. Bringing it back around to kids, have fun with this with your kids. M. Night Shyamalan had a movie called Lady in the Water. He wrote that as a bedtime story for his children when they were growing up.
Well, you mentioned The Hobbit. Same thing.
Was it?
Yeah. J.R.R. Tolkien wrote. Well, he wrote it as a kid's story, not necessarily a bedtime story, but
yeah. So there are things there that, because with your own development of your own skills and things, you may start with the bedtime stories that are written, but you may come up with your own.
Oh, exactly.
And the thing is, because, I've talked to some parents about, hey, do you read bedtime stories? And you kind of get this, well, no, not really.
Do it.
I mean, I'm just reading to them, and it's, it's kind of dull.
Do it.
And I'm like, make it fun.
Absolutely.
Create your own voices. Create your own actions.
Right, whatever it takes.
Yeah, whatever's you and your personality and how you want to play that out at bedtime, do it. Enjoy it, and because your kids will. They'll look forward to it. They'll remember it. It'll be huge. In residential treatment, I was reading bedtime stories to adolescent girls.
Not the typical audience that you would think of.
Not the typical audience. I would sit in one place in the hallway, and they would all come to their doors and sit in their doorways, and they would ask for it. And so I still have the voices going on, and I came to a place where they would actually pass the book around on the different nights, and a different girl each night would get to choose the story. And then I would read that story, and they would rather do that than other activities during that time. And what I came to find out is nobody ever read bedtime stories to them.
As they were growing up.
Right. And so here they are.
And they still wanted it.
Yes.
They just hadn't had it.
Girls, they were yearning for it. So there's a big piece here that helps with the development of the imagination and the fueled bonding between the parent and the child.
So this is one of the avenues to flesh out the kind of helping your child develop, building a relationship with your child. And, as we've mentioned, not something that all parents tune into on a regular, all the time basis.
And a lot of parents, because they didn't have that.
Themselves.
Yeah, themselves. They didn't know about that. They hadn't thought about that. and nobody had kind of given them permission that this was an avenue they could do.
Well, now you know.
You've been listening to the Empowering Choices Parenting Podcast. If you have enjoyed this show, we would encourage you to visit our website at empoweringchoices.community. For a small monthly fee, we offer a website full of parenting courses and resources. You also have the ability to connect with parents going through the same struggles you are in a safe and private environment. Every time you purchase a membership to our site, we give away a membership to a parent in financial need. Help yourself become a better parent while helping others gain access to important parenting materials by supporting our podcast. Check us out at empoweringchoices.community or in the App Store by searching Empowering Choices. We'll see you on our next episode.